it's quite clear that Kluivert and his Dutch coaching staff have learned the lessons from their Australia defeats and made a number of tweaks and changes that saw the Garudas deliver a much improved performance in front of nearly 70,000 heart-cheering Indonesians inside the compound tonight. That it's like Bahrain simply can't cope. In a way, they can't fully cope with what was in front of them in the cauldron. Indonesia mantap. The Garudas have gotten their World Cup final Asian qualifying back on track when they defeated Bahrain 1-0 in their Group C encounter at the Gelora Bung Karno Stadium tonight. And with that win, they have reinforced their reputation in making the Gelora Bung Karno a fortress, where in this stage of the World Cup qualifying campaign, they have in 4 home games, they have already recorded 2 wins. First Saudi Arabia last November, now Bahrain, and a 0-0 draw against Australia that made Graham Arnold resign from his Australia job after the draw last year too. Although they also suffered a 0-4 loss against a much superior Japan national team, who have since qualified for their 8 consecutive World Cup finals, which will be held next year in North America. Still, it's a hugely positive rebound for Patrick Kluivert's men after the Merah Putih were humbled in Australia last week in their 1-5 loss in what was a very tepid, aimless, poor display in the Dutch icon's first game in charge of the national team. And it's quite clear that Kluivert and his Dutch coaching staff have learned the lessons from their Australia defeats and made a number of tweaks and changes that saw the Garudas deliver a much improved performance in front of nearly 70,000 heart-cheering Indonesians inside the compound tonight. That it's like Bahrain simply can't cope. In a way, they can't fully cope with what was in front of them in the cauldron. And for this return fixture against Bahrain at home, Indonesia had something to prove, especially after what they deemed were robbed of 3 points following the additional time that saw them squandering a 2-1 lead into 2-2 deep into the added time, where it came to a point where the Indonesian fans in the subsequent game were claiming that the referee had put 90 plus 6 equal to 99. But with this win, it's all under the bridge now. Indonesia are currently 4th in Group C with 2 games to play. They remain in mathematical contention for the second automatic spot, even though Australia and Saudi are ahead of them. It's still mathematically possible for the Garudas and the Indonesians to dream, even though their final game away to Japan might be too much of a huge ask in June. But first, before that, they kept alive it, so that sets them up for a do or die penultimate clash against China at the same ground in June when the next international window opens. And that's also when the final rounds of the round 3 World Cup qualifying Asia campaign reaches its conclusion. And we would like to know how Indonesia got it so right this time when they got it so awfully wrong against Australia. Tanya je find out more. So which areas did Indonesia get it right where they got it all wrong against Australia in Sydney? First, Kluivert and his coaching staff probably realized that playing a back 4 is not the brightest of ideas, even though they had more Dutch born or more naturalized players in the squad than ever with the inclusion of a couple of new players this year. And the lack of cohesion was a major factor behind their disappointing defeat away the last time out. So it's quite clear that towards the end of the last 20 minutes or so in the game against Australia, that we saw a bit of semblance of how Indonesia used to play under Shin Tae-yong formation-wise, when you got a back three, the three centre-back pairing with two wing-backs, you get two holding midfielders, and three forwards. And this time round, Indonesia make four changes into the 11 that started in that disappointing loss against the Socceroos. Justin Hubner, the hard tackling all action defender centre-back, he returned from suspension. Rizky Ridho was restored into the starting 11 with Mies Hilger injured and unavailable for this match. So this leads to a back three the centre-back trio pairing of Izzes in the middle, Rizky Ridho on the right centre-back, and Justin Hubner left centre-back. Then you got the two wing-backs, Kelvin Verdong on the left and Kevin Diggs on the right. Then there is still a space for a debutant for the Garudas, with Joey Palupesi making his debut in centre midfield alongside Tom Hay. And the front three, another change, Ragnar Oratmogen partnering in right forward with Marcelino Ferdinand, the second Indonesian born in the squad, kept his place alongside Ole Romani. And this time round, you can see in a way it's like, formation wise it's a bit throwback to Shin Tae-yong. It's true, but there are distinct differences in this team's style of play compared to the one under Kluivert's predecessor, Shin Tae-yong. There is a stark difference because of the inclusion of more European-based naturalized players. So definitely the level did increase, but more crucially, with the return of Rizky Ridho into starting 11 and Justin Hubner, you get two players who are definitely committed for the cause, who are committed to wear this shirt, who are committed to risking their life and limb for the cause, especially at this stage of qualifying. We saw that eventually towards the end of the game when Rizky Ridho already had a cramp. Under normal circumstances, maybe could have just set out for the rest of the injury time, with Indonesia trying to hang on with just 10 men. But no, Rizky Ridho continued, and he had already made a few major contributions in this Bahrain game, which I will elaborate a bit later. But first, going to how it's different for Patrick Kluivert's Merah Putih this time. A few significant differences. The first one is really the style of play. You can say in a way a bit of total football, passing, and it is matched by the intensity, the passion, the commitment that were largely missing in the defeat to Australia. Once Kevin Diggs missed a penalty, and it was all downhill all the way. But this time round, it seems like they had transformed 180 degrees. They still kept their technical capabilities, but I think Kluivert and his team technical staff realized that you just cannot have a team full of technical players without a few more full-blooded, gutsy comrades alongside. I mean, Jay Izzes can't do everything on his own as the captain and the chief centre-back. You got Justin Hubner, who returned from suspension following his red card for 2 yellows against Saudi. He came back, that full-blooded English commitment was there. Once again, we saw it in all his finest glory defensively, especially in the second half. And Rizky Ridho, showed to Kluivert why he was Shin Tae-yong's among the first names under Shin Tae-yong when it comes to playing in defense during this World Cup qualifying phase. After being dropped to the bench for the game against Australia, I think no amount of technical skill can compensate for the guts, the glory, the passion you need, especially when you represent your country at international level, and especially when you know that there's so much at stake with the entire crowd who is capable of giving more than 100% to the team at the stands, but also is capable of pouring a lot of scorn when things really go wrong and it's clearly their fault. And so far, already things did not look that promising after Kluivert's first game in charge ended in a disastrous note. But still, the major improvement was that, especially with that level of intensity, that level of commitment, that level of focus, that level of passion. You see that for all throughout the game, when they were first in control of the possession, when they were attacking, the subtle style differences were there also. Previously under Shin Tae-yong, similar formation, but they would tend to play a bit more direct. They will rely a lot more on counter-attacks, solo counter-attacks from midfield all the way to the attacking third. But this time round, because of the technical ability of these naturalized players and the individual excellence of Marcelino Ferdinand and Rizky Ridho, they were able to utilize their technical strengths to outsmart the Bahrainis, where yes, they are among one of the better teams in Asia when it comes to the national team, but because none of the Bahrainis play in Europe, so they do not exactly have the smarts to comprehend what those guys wearing the red and white of Merah Putih were trying to do. And so it showed. And especially in the first half, that only goal of the game, it was that one moment of brilliance. It wasn't a direct ball to Marcelino, it was, I think, a defense splitting pass from midfield that saw the ball go through to Marcelino, and in that split second where he showed his ability to see his teammates run, to see that vision, he made that pass to Romani, and Romani just only had a keeper to beat. And that expert finish, I think, probably is because they are also club teammates at Oxford United, the English Championship side. That resulted in Romani scoring his second goal in as many caps. He also scored the only goal for Indonesia in their loss in Australia, but this time round it happened to be the match winner, 3 points, 4th in the standings, and Indonesia could really have gotten more. The second half, Marcelino, if he has struck his leg instead of his shin and bounced out of another good cross, Kevin Dix in his third cap for Indonesia was having a stormer on the right wing. He was marauding down the flanks. He was causing so many problems to the Bahraini defenders until the visitors decided to just attempt to hack him out of the game. Not that it helped, because it helped the Garudas earn more set plays at their expense. And Bahrain, you can say they weren't used to that type of tempo. It's like this time around, it's not just your European-based players, but also the European style of coaching and education and play from Kluivert and his coaching staff to combine with the players. So Dragan Talajic, the Bahrain head coach, and his coaching staff struggled, and you got that vociferous backing. I mean, which away team will be able to tahan, will be able to tolerate, will be able to withstand that kind of clodder where 70,000 Indonesians were willing for their country to win in this qualifier, and they're willing to, knowing that the World Cup, however distant maybe for now, it's getting back to inching a bit closer to their first appearance since 1938. And technically, no one put a foot wrong. Almost no one put a foot wrong. Risky Riddle, 2 big clearances in the second half, especially the one that where he headed out when Indonesia goalkeeper Martin Paes was well beaten by that looping shot that was almost heading towards goal. And that's why Risky Riddle should never have been dropped from the starting 11 in the first place. He may not have had that physical attributes and leadership of Jay Itzes, but he has that mentality, the Lions mentality, where he refused to be beaten even when facing stronger opponents, even when facing tougher opponents. His defensive resoluteness is one of the factors behind Indonesia's second victory in this stage of the World Cup qualifying campaign, and that he is also one of the reasons why Indonesia's World Cup 2026 dream remains well and alive heading into the June international window. Then what about your other players who had previously underperformed in the Australian game, but Kelvin Verdong upped his game? Dix, as I mentioned, having the best game in a Garuda jersey. Then you have Joey Palupesi. He put no foot wrong throughout the 90 minutes he was there. Then you also have Tom Hay, who ran his socks off for the cause, as he had always done. And he was there. He was one of the main instruments behind many of the Indonesia attacks in the first half and in the first third of the second half, before eventually the humidity also affected some of the European-based players from Indonesia and they had to be substituted out. But still, no matter, Marcelino near miss. Then you had I think Kambuya. He had also another glorious chance to put the game beyond doubt. Ilanio Reniers, the Indonesia number 8. It was like after being put through, unmarked inside the box, with just again the goalkeeper to be just shot that little bit over. Imagine if all these golden opportunities had converted into goals. It would have easily eclipsed that 2-0 win over Saudi Arabia in November, and would be the biggest result that Indonesia would have gotten in this World Cup qualifier. And after that, naturally Bahrain in the second half, they gradually step up their attacking tempo and try to find a way past pace and all that. Hubner, final 10 minutes, already tired, still putting full-blooded tackles for the cause. At one time, even bailing out Kelvin Verdong with another solid tackle. And also, I recall towards late in the game, when the Bahrain striker was closing in on goal, and with just the goal to beat, there comes Hubner, perfectly timed sliding tackle to make sure that there was no way he could ever try to test the Indonesian goalkeeper Martin Paes. Not at all. Jay Itzes, the leadership personified, leading the backline with a lot of gusto, with a lot of leadership, with inspiration and bull-headedness when it comes to being resolute at the back, being the colossus, being the rock that the rest of the team will rally around. Risky Riddle, as I mentioned, you cannot just leave out a good local-born defender who had been integral to Shin Tae-yong's plans just like that. And I hope Kluivert and his coaching staff will have learned this lesson. It's like, yes, you probably still trust the naturalized players more, but Marcelino, Ferdinand and Risky Riddle and even the other few local born subs who came on later in the game, they have shown that they can be counted upon to do the job when it really mattered. Even when they are on the defensive or doing whatever it takes to secure the result. towards the end, because this is not a cakewalk in the park. Every tackle method, every foul method, every pass method, every through ball method, every attempt and goal method, every set piece method, every decision method, whether it was in defense or attack, Indonesia were largely flawless. And as a result of that, you can say that the redemption is half complete after the disastrous loss to Australia. But the job is not done yet. Kluivert was brought in together with his coaching staff by the PSSI president Eric Thohir, to show that the Indonesian national team can really push over that finishing line, possibly even finishing second to take that second automatic spot in that group alongside Japan, who have already qualified. Even if they don't, they can still go on to the fourth round of World Cup Asia qualifying, where 6 more teams will compete for 2 more automatic spots in the expanded 48 nation World Cup tournament to be held in North America next year. So by staying in 4th place, there's still plenty to fight for. And I mean, with such a faultless performances, individual performances, team performance, it was overall excellent in a similar way how they pulled it off against Saudi Arabia. And with just one more home game to go at this stage of World Cup qualifying, and that will be the next one against China, the one where they previously lost away last year in this stage, a narrow loss when they probably had underestimated the Chinese. Even though the Chinese and Bahrain are now propping up in the 6-team group with just only 6 points from 8 matches, Indonesia are 4th with 9. There's still a lot to fight for. There's still a lot to chase for. Even though their final group game is against Japan, if they manage to defeat China in June, then 4th place is almost as good as secure for the Garudas. And Patrick Kluivert will have accomplished that first part of that World Cup mission that he's brought in to do this by Eric Thohir this year. And that will allow Patrick Kluivert to gain some goodwill among the Indonesian fans, who are always so willing for their Garudas to excel on an international stage, as much as they were upset by the sacking of Shin Tae-yong late last year. And Shin is still around backing the team, so the players know that they are not only just fighting for the current coaching regime of Patrick Kluivert, but also the foundations in which Shin Tae-yong has built, particularly with the local born players and also with the naturalized players that Shin has worked with, and some of whom have also enjoyed working with in last year's Asian Cup finals in Qatar. So with that win, the World Cup dream is still alive. It's still well and good, and they can look forward to more drama in their Gelora Bung Karno fortress against China in June. And who knows, that could be the month where a new chapter in Indonesian football history would be written.